Today's passage is coming from the Old Testament, from the book of Deuteronomy, and it is the Shema, Deuteronomy 6:4, which reads, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one."
So when you say one God, you have to explain what you mean by one. One what? For example, we can speak of one nation, one family, one universe, but the universe is complex. So to say God is one is basically to say nothing.
Yes, that's exactly right. So what is the Bible talking about when it says that God is one? So here's the Shema, Yahweh our God, Yahweh is one. Now the debate continues to be whether the Yahweh here, the subject of the Shema, is to be regarded as a person at all, and whether the word one in Hebrew really means one, and not two or three or more. In his book, Jesus as God, Dr. Murray Harris says, Yahweh is invariably the name of a person who sustains relationships with other persons. This name is never used generically of deity, but always personally and individually of the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. So obviously, the God of the Bible is not one what. It's obviously a who, in this case, a non-human divine individual person. It's not some kind of community or family made up of other different individuals or persons.
Genesis 2:24. It says, "For this reason a man shall leave his father and mother, and cleave to his wife, cling to his wife, and the two shall become basar echad," one flesh.
The word one appears some 1,000 times according to the Brown Driver Briggs Hebrew lexicon. It's an adjective and a number. It occurs in phrases which compare one and two. So this notion that the word somehow connotes or defines the one personal individual Yahweh as a compound or complex unity is to really go beyond all standards and rules of language. Because the noun doesn't alter the singular meaning of the number or pronoun one. The often used one flesh is not talking about two fleshes. A single cluster of grapes, it's not two clusters of grapes. So the plural grapes doesn't alter or change the meaning of the pronoun one. Here translated single. Two are better than one, not two. And Abraham was one person, not two persons, etc. You could multiply these examples throughout the Old Testament. So echad is always one in every single case, without exception. Further evidence is found in the Greek translation of the Hebrew scriptures. You have the words is, that's the Greek for one, and it works the same as the echad word. And you have the phrase is theos, or theos is, which invariably means God is one or one God. And you can paraphrase that as he is one, that is one person. And many translations do. And once again, this is confirmed by many evangelicals. You have Vincent's Word Studies, the masculine is one person. The famous textual critic Bruce Metzger, in the masculine, is means one, numerically one person. And then there's every other form of the language used to signify that Yahweh, the Lord God of the Shema, is one individual, one person, is used throughout the Old Testament. So here's a couple of examples. You, God, even you alone, you have made the heaven, the earth, and all things. Now, O Lord, that's that Yahweh word, our God, I pray, deliver us from his hand, that all the kingdoms of the earth may know that you alone, O Lord, Yahweh, are God, that they may know that you alone, whose name is the Lord, that is the Yahweh of the Shema. And again, evangelicals have to agree with this simple fact. The pulpit commentary, he did not even call in the cooperation of a helper. Singly and solely by his own power, he created all things. Brown Driver again, he stretched out the heavens alone, that is, in a state of separation by oneself.
What it says in the Hebrew is Shema Yisrael, so hear, O Israel.
Right.
Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Yeah.
Lord, our God, Lord, one.
Interesting.
Now think about this,
There
right?
you go, huh?
It names God. It's like saying God, God,
What a
God, one.
coincidence,
God, 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 one. God, 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 one. And there's even a Jewish commentary, the Zohar, that draws attention to this and starts talking about the three names being one. And how do we how do we know that the three names are nevertheless one? Well, we know it through faith and so on. And there's a Jewish commentary. Right? Was there ever a period when Jews were more open to a plurality within the one God?
In fact, we have textual proof for the assertion I'm about to make. In fact, the standard work on this is by Siegel, a Jewish scholar who wrote a book, Two Powers in Heaven. We have evidence not just from the Hebrew Bible, but also extra-biblical Jewish sources written before the time of Jesus and contemporary with Jesus. A large segment of the Jews thought that God was multi-personal.
So this is quite incredible, appealing to Jewish mysticism to prove your point. And what's telling in this video is what they're not telling you. It's called the two powers heresy. Dr. McGrath, in his study of the issue, Are There Two Powers in John? The issue is therefore not equality with God per se, but whether Jesus makes himself equal to God. God could appoint agents who would represent him and bear his full authority, like Moses, the judges of Israel, and angels. It was only when someone who had not been appointed by God tried to put himself on a par with God, like the first Adam and Pharaoh, that equality with God became problematic and even blasphemous. And it was into this latter category that the Jews placed Jesus. For the moment, it's sufficient to state that, in our view, the Johannine conflict with the Jews did not concern a supposed abandonment of Jewish monotheism on the part of the Johannine Christians. Rather, the issue is whether Jesus is an agent carrying out God's will and purposes, or a blasphemer who's seeking glory and power for himself in a manner that detracts from the glory due to the only God. Again, the issue, rather than being about the oneness of God or monotheism, is consistently about whether Jesus is the Messiah and about whether he makes himself God or makes himself equal to God. The other thing they're not telling you is that Zohar, the scriptures of the Kabbalah, a Jewish mystical system, is paganism, another flat-out heresy. This was introduced into biblical studies by Renaissance authors like Mirandola here in his famous manifesto, who extolled the virtues of this system when it was rediscovered by Europeans. He wrote, there was to be found the mystery of the Trinity, the incarnation of the Word, the divinity of the Messiah. In philosophical matters, it were as though one were listening to Pythagoras and Plato, whose doctrines bear so close an affinity to the Christian faith that our Augustine offered endless thanks to God that the books of the Platonists had fallen into his hands.
So I wouldn't say that this explicitly teaches the Trinity, but to say that a text that says God, 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 one is somehow denying the Trinity, when you could look at that and say, wow, what's wrong with this?